Okay, picking up where we left off last time, this is a scaled down and trimmed model of a topography taken from Google SketchUp. The scale is 1 to 10,000, and just to remind myself of that, I'm going to create a text dot by typing DOT dot and text to display 1 to 10,000 scale, and I'm going to put it at the origin. On the default layer is fine. I'm going to turn off the boundary layer because I already know that the boundary is trimmed appropriately. Now if you remember, we trimmed this from a much larger surface, and if we turn the points on by pressing F10 or typing points on, it actually still remembers the original dimensions of the surface. And we don't need this information anymore. We're only concerned with this 200 by 200 box. So I'm going to turn points off and do a command called shrink trim surface. If I just start typing shrinked, it already pops up automatically. And so that redefines the surface as we had trimmed it. It does exactly what it sounds like it does. So now if we turn the points back on, it's falling completely within our 200 by 200 block. Okay, for the next step, I need to, instead of just a surface, I need to turn this into a volume. Ultimately, we're going to be creating a volume using the laser cutter, so let's quickly go ahead and turn this into a volume. Let's turn the boundary back on and extrude again. Extrude curve. We can just do, we don't need to do both sides anymore, we just do one side. Let's keep this on the boundary layer. And then clicking the surface again, let's trim this boundary surface. Okay, so now we have edge conditions. Select that, and let's put this on the landscape layer. It's all kind of the same object now. Let's select both of those surfaces and type join. You can see now it says two surfaces or polysurfaces joined into one open polysurface. And we can go ahead and cap, which will create a surface along the bottom. So now we have a solid closed volume, or a closed polysurface, as you can also call it. Let's turn off the isocurves. And now let's manually duplicate the effect of the contour command. Let's do that with a rectangular plane. If we just type plane, and let's do that on the contour lines layer, and just draw a planar surface that covers more than the existing boundary. This doesn't matter which size because we're going to delete it later, but just make sure that you cover the entirety of your model. Next we're going to do the array command, which will just copy the surface up and a specified number of steps with a specified number of dimension of distance. So let's do an x direction 1, and y direction 1, and z direction, let's do 12. Z spacing or reference point, let's stick with 3 millimeters to represent our material thickness. And press enter to accept. If we go to wireframe mode, we can see our existing landscape model. Let's select all of these surfaces as well as the landscape model and type intersect. Make sure you're on the contour lines layer. And that'll just calculate all the intersections between these 12 planar surfaces and the landscape model. Okay, and let's do Control G to create a group and delete these surfaces. Go back to shaded viewport. Let's ungroup these because we're going to need to work with them later. If you select one of the lines, for example, you see that it's created a enclosed boundary. Now we don't need the lines at the base. We can turn the boundary layer off, and we still have closed curves here, which we don't actually need. We can delete those. Okay. So we're left with the remaining contour lines, which should be all closed. And just to check, we can type SEL, CLO, select closed curve. You can see that all these are selected. If we do SEL open, select open curve, we see there are no objects added to the selection. That's good. That means all of our geometry is closed, which is exactly what we want. Now before we start converting this into geometry, which can be cut with a laser cutter, let's just create a quick visualization of what it's going to look like. Because the laser cutter is only going to cut flat geometry, we can only create extruded representations, as opposed to a CNC machine or a 3D printer or other means of digital fabrication. So let's create a new layer. Let's call it extrusions. Make these contour lines a different color. And we can right click on contour lines and select objects. You can see all 24 closed curves were selected. And let's turn off the landscape so we can see what we're left with, and turn off the default layer as well. And then type extrude curve. There we go. Now we can see our geometry and the representation of what it'll look like when it's laser cut. Okay. Now undo that. And now let's talk about how to arrange this, these closed curves in a way that can be laser cut. Okay, I'm going to go back into a side view, and I'll turn the boundary back on. And we want to just create groups of contour lines. So for example, while we have this is a closed curve, and all of our geometry here is consisting of closed curves, we want to make sure that we keep all of the same level grouped together. Let's go back to the front. We can start from the top. Create a group as well as a dot. Let's first do the dot. Let's say level 1. Put that here. Level 2. Level 3. These aren't going to be aligned, but just to help us keep this in order. 4, 5, 6. Then we also have 10. Okay. If we just select crossing as well as the dot, and Control G for group, so we get all of these together. Once I create a group, I can hide it just temporarily. Okay, we'll leave one where it is. Go back to perspective view, Control Shift H to unhide. And now just for the sake of visualization, let's just copy this boundary. Do it 10 times like this. Okay. And then just go through. Just do it by selecting on the text dots and move. Forget about the Z height for the moment. We'll get back to that later. Just move from the reference point to the reference point. So for example, from the bottom right corner here to the bottom right corner here. Line group 8. Then here. Finally, second group. So the first group is just a flat plane, which we'll build on top of, and then we can see a progression of how the contours work up. Our problem now is that these are all at different heights, but that's quickly solved by selecting everything and doing set point, SETPT, set just Z, like that. Let's turn off the boundary layer and again do select closed curves. And so we can see for now, we can do a planar curve command. Planar surface. It gives us a better idea of how much material we're using. Of course, we can create a model just by cutting out like this within these boundaries, but we can also compress this a bit to save some space and use our material more efficiently. Okay, so if we start moving this around, we're going to perhaps lose track of what's on which layer. So let's go into top view and try to be a little bit more precise. When we laser cut, we can also etch on a separate layer. So we can specify a number, and that can be etched on top of the cut geometry. So let's create a new layer. Call it text. Because these text dots won't actually be cut, this is just for our reference. And then we can create a text object on this layer. I'll type in text. Start point is here, it's fine. Height of 1 millimeter. Let's do 4 millimeters instead. And this is just going to say 1. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Scale. 2 times the size. Okay. And then we can copy this over. Double click to change the text. Let's lock this contour lines layer. And just because we have just one surface here, that's enough. We also just have one surface for 3. But for 4, we've got a couple different ones. So let's change this to 4, and then copy it to each surface so we don't lose track. This one's really small, so I'm just going to forget about it. This one I can fit here. Okay. And 5. I'll also forget about these ones. Well, I can scale this down. Still cut this out. Okay, and just do the same thing for the next 5 as well. Okay, in the next step we can go ahead and remove these text dots because we've already labeled all the individual pieces with text tags. Do that by typing SELDOT, select dot. Oh, sorry, unlock the layer. SELDOT, delete. And then let's select the text and explode. The reason we have to do that is that these have to be represented as curves. Otherwise they won't be recognized by the laser cutter. So now we've got these curves, surfaces, and grouped curves. So let's select all of this and ungroup. Delete these very small pieces that we don't need. And turn off the boundary layer. Now we can just rearrange these in a way that's going to be more efficient to cut. We can try to be a little systematic, just so we can keep track better. So just make sure you select the curve and the number, and just hold shift and drag these around a bit. Leave this one. Continue on. Okay, now that I have everything arranged in a way that's more efficient for saving material, I want to select the surfaces. So I don't need those anymore. For using the laser cutter, we only need curves. Just delete those. And let's change this to contour lines. We also need to cut this out. Okay, and then let's rename these layers contour lines. Let's call it cut. And text is score. One important final step is that we select all of this geometry that we want to cut out and mirror it. Otherwise, when we score these numbers, they're going to appear on the top. So select everything and mirror. You just do this over to the side here and delete the original. Now this is all inverted, and we'll be able to hide the numbers underneath. Okay. Now that we have everything ready to go, we can select and export as an AutoCAD DXF. 2004 lines is okay. And we're done.